Becoming an aunt a couple of years ago, and now becoming a parent, I realized more than what I originally thought how parenting has changed from when I grew up in the 90s, and even more than when my parents were growing up. I used to sit in the back seat without a seatbelt. Right? And I remember traveling in the car as a little girl with my grandmother, and I would sit in the front seat in between her legs, and she'd strap us both in. Right? Like, those things don't happen anymore. Or how many times would you just leave your child in the car with the window cracked, right? When you just like ran in someplace, it was only going to take like a couple minutes, right? And your child would just sit in the car. You can't do those things anymore. Right? And so parenting has changed significantly from when I was growing up or even when you all were growing up as well. And so after having my daughter, Flora, my sister, who has my first nephew, sent me a bunch of Instagram accounts on parenting in today's age. And I think the new, more updated versions of parenting are a lot better, and it is almost like training parents how to get out of the mindset of how they were raised in order to raise emotionally, physically, and mentally intuitive children. And in these parenting accounts, all of them say that kids are crying or acting up, that people believe that kids crying or acting up could be manipulating you, right? They're just trying to get something out of you. And all of these things say that that's not true, that there's a reason why they're acting up, right? They have some sort of feelings. And they also tell you as the parents to meet the child where they are, to help them express their feelings and emotions, to help them name what's going on and what they're feeling. Or these accounts also help demonstrate and deconstruct the idea that when your child is throwing a tantrum, that you should not just ignore them or send them away until they calm down. But what they found is that by doing that, the child doesn't learn how to handle any situation, and they don't reflect on their behavior because they're flooded with all these emotions of anger or abandonment. And that sends a message that having big feelings are not okay. Which through this birth of Jesus, God is showing us what type of God our Creator is, what type of parenting style God uses to help us navigate the world. Because we often look at the birth of Jesus as God came from heaven to take on our human form to show us just how much God loves us. Which is correct, don't get me wrong, but there is a little bit more going on than just that. When God surveyed humanity and realized how dark and difficult our days could be, how confused we get about our identity and place, how many painful things we do to each other out of that confusion and insecurity, God decided to do something about it. And so after giving the law and sending the prophets, God got involved, personally, intimately involved with God's fallen creation. But the most amazing thing about God is God's parenting style. When God decided to get personally involved, God didn't come to punish or frighten or scold or threaten or any of the other things that are often attributed to God. Instead, God came to tell us that we are loved deeply, truly, and forever and ever. God came to us to be with us, to experience what we experience, to feel what we feel, to see what we see, to do what we do, and God comes down to our level and doesn't ignore us until we calm down, but rather helps us learn how to deal with the situations that we're experiencing, shows us that we are loved and how to love others. God becomes flesh so that we don't feel abandoned. And God first brought that message, embodied in the flesh by Jesus, to people the world was pretty sure weren't particularly important, or for that matter, loved. No account shepherds, an unwed teenage mother, astrologers practicing a whole different type of religion, all of this to show that God wasn't going to leave anyone behind, that God's message of love was for all, every single being on this planet. And as in everyone, whether the world thought you were important or lovable or not. And that's still the way that this is. God loves all of us, but especially wants those who don't feel loved or lovable, those who regularly feel like they're on the outside looking in, those who feel forgotten, abandoned, and those who wonder what the point of life is, to hear the good news of great joy that God loves all of us. Because one of the most overlooked things about this Christmas story is when the angels proclaim, Jesus is born for you. Those two words of the angels' song that capture the heart of the Christian message, for you. Notice it's not just that Jesus is born, but the angels say Jesus is born for you. And it's not just good news in general, but it's good news of great joy for you and all people. So perhaps in this simple Christmas message, the birth of Jesus shows us that God believes that we are worthy of honor and dignity, and above all else, love.